Good evening, everyone. Janice has asked me to have you all scoot forward a little bit more so we can make this an intimate conversation. Those of you in the front are fine. You can keep your seats. So my name is Kayshawn Henderson, and this year I have the pleasure of serving as the president of the Black Law Students Association for the Georgetown University Law Center. I wanted to take a brief moment to welcome you all to the first annual Financial Health Symposium hosted by BALSA. And I wanted to take a short little second here to acknowledge the work of the organizer, Janice Davis. This is her brainchild, and the co-organizers, Wenzel Steele and Kenneth Crawford. So if you could join me. On behalf of BALSA and the larger Georgetown law community, I want to thank you all for your tremendous work in putting this together. It is tough to build an event from the ground up, and we appreciate it and are thankful for that. I also wanted to take a second to thank all of the departments and offices that made this possible and who were instrumental in making this event a success. In a moment, I'll introduce Dean Balin, but I wanted to take an opportunity to help frame or place this event in context of our larger Black History Month programming. For the month, the BHM committee has worked to plan over a dozen events, each addressing different aspects of the African American experience. Today's event seeks to equip our members in the larger community with the tools to make healthy financial choices, something that is vital to ensuring future success. So now that I've helped to frame this quite a bit, and we are expecting some more people to come on in, so to those people who just came in the back, you can move on up. I see you, Josh. Go ahead and come on to the front. So I've had a chance to frame this event a bit. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dean Balin, Associate Vice President and Dean of Students. Dean Balin oversees the student life at the Law Center, including supervision of the Student Affairs Office, Residence Life, Wellness Promotion, Disability Services Office, and the Office of Equity, Community, and Inclusion. To us, Dean Balin has been a vital resource for BALSA, and we are grateful for his leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, Dean Balin.
Okay, Sean, thanks. That was really generous. Good evening, everybody. How are you? Thank you for being here. So this is a delight. This is the first inaugural of what I hope will be many future financial health symposia, right, Janice? Yes, that's where we're headed. I'm super grateful to BALSA and to Janice in particular for their energy in putting this together, for what I hope will be a really productive set of conversations tonight and in the future. I'm also really grateful to our outside guests. Would you raise your hand if you are one of the financial advisors or experts who have joined us tonight? Thank you all. You are giving your time and your expertise and your grace to students and others who will really benefit from that. And so we are grateful you are here and partnering with Georgetown Law with us. Let me just say briefly, I think Georgetown Law is an ideal fit to be inaugurating an event like this. We're a Jesuit school. Some of you may not know that. And in the Jesuit tradition, what do? We educate the whole person, the whole student, not just their legal brains. And when we think of educating you, our students, as whole people, we know that a whole broad range of skills come into play that we're probably not teaching you every day in the classroom, but we know you need to obtain to be happy and to be successful. As lawyers, as law students, let's be honest, as people. So this program, I think, is a great fit, Janice, because I think what it is doing is addressing one of those skills that helps you to become whole people and whole professionals, and that's your personal financial wellness. Why do I know this? Let me be really candid. I've been doing this work for 14 years, and behind closed doors, I hear a lot from our students, right? I know that issues around finances are stressful and they cause worries, right? There's a debt load. Some of you are carrying or will carry $100,000, $150,000, upwards of $200,000 of debt. By the time you leave here, you're worried about earning enough money to pay that off, about finding a job that will help you do that, about helping your families on top of that, buying a house, having a family can cause stress. It can interfere with your studies, with law practice, with your well-being. I found with a lot of students it just makes them feel out of control. So as you're going to hear tonight, you can take control. Take control of your finances starting now in a very personalized and intentional way, a way that's congruent with your own values, your own priorities. And the good news is, thank you to our guests tonight in particular, you can do that with a lot of help from people who care and want to be your partners in this. So that's enough for me. Let's turn this over to some experts. I am delighted to introduce Janice Davis, a wonderful student who joined us this year at Georgetown, has brought huge energy to BALSA, to our student body, and in particular to the goals behind this event. So Janice, it's a pleasure.
Well, good evening, everyone. I am so incredibly grateful to every face that's in this room, because you have made the decision, either as someone that believes in my vision enough, or the greater vision enough to be a partner, or because you believe in yourself and there's something that you want for yourself, and that's why you decided to come. And so I'm grateful for your support. I'm grateful, obviously, that you decided that this was worth your time. So I just wanted to take a moment to give you sort of the bigger vision that I had for this event. Like Dean Balin said, I'm a transfer student. I'm a new, face in the Law Center. But I knew that transitioning to this law school meant it meant some changes in my life. I can be a wallflower if I let myself, but I just wasn't okay with that. And when I started law school, there is this idea that you have two roads. You're either going to go make a lot of money in big law, or you're going to, be that do-gooder, that's good. But, you're just not going to be as fancy as the rest, or, whatever those ideas were. And I just wasn't okay with that. I don't think I've ever been okay with being forced to choose between two roads that did not speak to my values, and they did not speak to who I was. And that was supposed to be the representation of my life and my life's work. So putting those things together, I said, I've got to step out into who I really want to be. And I want to be brave. I want to live a life that I really believe in. I want to be happy. And you know what's wonderful about that? Is that I'm not alone. So Dean said something so important, that the conversations he has behind closed doors are very similar. People are disgruntled and maybe not exactly happy with what their choices are. And if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of that boils down to how we feel about our financial situation and how confident we feel about our personal finances and our ability to steward them. So here I am. It's Black History Month. I'm Black. It's Black History Month, a month that is important to me for different reasons, but more importantly, there's a history in the Black American community of not having access, where that access is important, to financial services, not having access to intellectual capital about what to do with your money, where to go when you have questions. And all of that spoke to me, and I said, well, why not use this month and this time and this space to launch into that very thing that I want, and that is courage and to be happy and to live the life that I really want. So with no further ado, I would love nothing more than to introduce the panelists. This is a two-part panel, so we're going to have sort of two sections of people speak. It's an intimate crowd, which I think it's lovely. I love when people come because this is what they really want, you know, this is what they're really interested in. So we really want this to be beneficial to all guests in the room. We'll split it into two parts, but we really want people to feel as vocal and in part of the conversation as possible. Okay, so I will start by introducing Assistant Dean for Financial Aid at Georgetown University Law Center. My personal more than a cheerleader, I don't want to use that word, but just the person that really I think is the reason why I can stand here and be so excited about this. But since starting with Georgetown Law, Charles Pruitt has held the position of Assistant Director of Financial Aid. His office is recognized as a national leader in graduate financial aid for its commitment to the financial education of its students. He has been with the Law Center for over 20 years, and his well-respected area of expertise is financial planning and credit counseling for law students. The ever-evolving state of the economy ensures that the need of Georgetown Law students' body are constantly changing. He regularly works with students to increase their knowledge of financial planning and illuminates the nuances and pitfalls important to Georgetown Law. Mr. Pruitt, since 1999, he's launched this flagship financial program called Life After Georgetown Law, which prepares thousands of graduating students to enter the real world as informed earners and consumers. And what's important about this event is that it kind of gets people's whistle wet before that event comes, and I'm so glad we can do that. Would you please join us on stage, Assistant Dean? Doesn't matter. Our next panelist is a graduate, an alum of the university. So happy to have a familiar face back on campus, especially one that can really feel what it's like to be sitting in these seats. Matthew Bassans is a financial service regulatory and enforcement associate at Mayer Brown in their Washington, D.C. office. He counsels U.S. and non-U.S. financial service firms on a variety of regulatory compliance enforcement and transactional matters. So, for example, he advises financial institutions on banking and derivatives regulations, insolvency and resolution issues, data privacy and cybersecurity concerns. He also advises on Dodd-Frank Act compliance issues, including the Volcker Rule and Section 165 enhanced prudential standards. Now, Matt joined the firm in 2013, after completing a joint JD-LM in Securities and Financial Regulation at Georgetown University. Matt also holds a license as a certified public accountant, and prior to law school, he practiced as a tax accountant with PricewaterhouseCoopers in their tax-exempt organization group, and before that completed his bachelor's and master's at Hofstra University. Please welcome Matthew Bassans. Our next guest, someone I'm thrilled to to invite to speak on our panel. And by the way, this is the first half where we're talking about building that foundation, and I think there's nobody that embodies that more than our next panelist. Mr. Wilson Muscadin, he calls himself a millennial. He says, but that's not all that he is. He says an MBA, a financial coach, and a certified financial education instructor with over 14 years of experience in the financial service industry with firms such as Fidelity Investment and Chubb Insurance. Wilson is passionate about empowering individuals to take ownership and control over their financial futures. Wilson paid off his own student loans worth over $100,000 in 4 years. And has coached countless, yes, exactly, has coached countless people, both individuals and couples, providing him the ability to bring more than just quality information to clients, but tangible and practical tools to transform their relationship with money. Mr. Wilson Muscadin. Last but certainly not least, I would like to invite I'm so grateful that this person has decided to be a part of our panel. We wanted to have a diverse group and an array of voices. Miss Nadia Thompson, she is a retail banking bank branch manager from Wells Fargo. Yes, please. Yeah. She's very local. She's right here on North Capitol and E. As a branch manager, she is the leader of the branch team and serves as the face of Wells Fargo in the community by actively participating in community events and committees and business groups. She's focused on building lifelong relationships with customers, both consumers and small businesses. She fosters a positive work environment where team members are encouraged, motivated, and developed to achieve their maximum potential by leveraging coaching and performance management tools and process. So let's give her a round of applause. Hello, everyone. It's good to see you. You know, when you have this vision of what things are going to look like, and then they come together. So these are wonderful, so many years of experience and ideas we have right here on the panel. I would like to kick things off by asking a question that I hope all of my panelists can answer. What is your personal story? Not, you know, the novel version, but the small story that says this is how I came into financial health, and this is at least why such a topic is so important in the work that I do or the work that I have done. Most definitely because it's inspired by my personal life. Matthew, if you could start.
Thank you, Janice, and thank you again for inviting all of us here. I think back to the winter of 2008 to 2009. At the time, I was an accountant in New York City, and I had just broken my leg, and I was studying for the CPA exam, and I was also applying to law school. And for those of you who remember back at that time, the economy was also not doing that well. In a period of a few months, I decided to quit my job as an accountant and come down to Georgetown. And I had my savings from working about a year as an accountant. And I told myself, well, I need to make that last 3 years. I had student loans and I had scholarships and assistance from Georgetown. But I kind of said, like, for my spending money, for incidentals and things, I need to make this savings last. Now, as Janice mentioned, I ended up spending 4 years here at Georgetown, so I completely blew that budget. But coming to the approaching law school with the here is what my resources are, here is the limits I have, really guided me in the experience of being in D.C. and picking things like going to a museum or going to the sculpture garden for the free performance there instead of paying a ridiculous cover at one of the clubs in the evening. And so making those choices and approaching it as a long-term marathon through law school was a really guiding moment of my financial planning career.
Yeah.
I guess I'll go. I have to give credit to my father. It definitely goes back to my childhood, but my father's a Haitian immigrant. He's a physician, But when I was growing up, he, for my allowance, he had me read books and write book reports for my allowance. And many of those books were personal finance books. So I'm actually admitting that on stage, and it's really weird. But I didn't realize that was weird until I got to college. And so my college experience, and many of you might remember this experience of going into the cafeteria, and there's people sitting at the table, and they're offering you credit cards for a free T-shirt and that kind of thing. So I started to see my classmates spending, using credit cards to buy all kinds of things, like gas, pizza, and I couldn't understand why people were using money this way. Like, because my relationship with my father and what he taught me about money, I was like, that's crazy. Why are people doing stuff like this? And so it wasn't until my latter experiences that I realized the disparate education, financial education between people that had an experience like mine and others that didn't. And so that sort of prompted me within working in financial services and trying to help people understand the fundamentals of finance and how important that is to the trajectory of your financial well-being, why that is so important. Because it's not, K through 12, undergrad, I have an MBA from Duke University. We never talked about personal finance. Everything I learned from personal finance was outside of school, and so, or outside of traditional education, I would say. And so I find that so important because finance affects essentially everything that we do. And so that's what became a passion for me.
Good evening, everyone. For me, when I was in college, I got caught up in the whole scene where, as you're speaking of, we're offering credit cards for free things, and I didn't really know better, I guess I would say, and so I signed up for one of those credit cards and I started spending. And I quickly maxed out that credit card and I learned from experience that this is not how life works, and so I had to really work at building back my credit and making sure that I was making those payments on time. I ended up having to get a part-time job to make sure that I can make those payments, and from that, when I was in school, my part-time job ended up being with the bank, and so from there I was able to learn a lot about credit and how it works and how I can build it up, and so here I am today, and that's what brought me here.
I would also say that for me, it was family as well, in that growing up, my folks weren't ones that would spend. They would always stretch. My father was, and still is, someone who would never do something that you could. For example, I've never, ever had someone come to our house that could repair something. He's an aerospace engineer, and he can fix everything. And so when you're young and you realize your parents don't have credit cards until they had to get one because we were going on a trip. Right. And they needed it to get a rental car. And so that was when they got their first credit card from a credit union. It was a very, you knew you didn't buy things until you could afford it. And my mother could and still can stretch a dollar farther than anyone I know, and she has that magic purse in case of an emergency. It comes out. But I realized relatively young that not everyone, even though their families were spending and seemed to be happy, they weren't. That the money itself wasn't driving their happiness. It was causing stress in their parents' relationships and other things. And it made me realize that to be truly wealthy is not a matter of dollars. It's a matter of being able to help those that you care about without concern of it destroying your own personal finance. And so, I realized that, as a younger person, as I went through my undergraduate experience, I was on the financial assistance counseling team at my undergraduate, which was a peer-to-peer. And it just grew from there, and that sometimes people just need someone they can talk to, and they didn't have the same experience. And so we've leveraged that into what we do here. So.
I think you bring up a really good point. A few of the panelists do. The word taboo comes to mind. I don't know if anybody else feels that way in the room, but I know that growing up there were just certain things I couldn't ask my parents, not even knowing that I couldn't ask them. I just didn't think to ask them. I didn't think this was a topic of breakfast conversation, But it is the verbal and nonverbal lessons that come from the family, I think, that have a very lifelong impact on life, mine included. I'll go back to you, Dean Pruitt, with this question. Myself, I know there's at least one other in the room, we have student loans. You and I have sat in conference together, and we've briefly talked about this, but could you discuss the uniqueness of student loans and why that's a little bit different maybe than another loan we feel beholden to coming out of law school, and thus, of course, we try to make decisions accordingly. And I guess the follow-up to that is, how would you encourage a student to sort of rethink the way they think about their student loan?
Okay. One of the unique features of a student loan is, A, it's really easy to get. B, the terms are wildly variable depending on what year in school you are, who your lender is, you know, how many different repayment plans. You get a mortgage, you have one repayment plan. You know, sign up for a 30-year note, you pay it 360 payments. With the federal loan programs, there are 5 different income-driven repayment plans. None of them are really clear as to why they're better than another. There are extended repayment, extended graduate repayment, consolidation options, and the standard repayment, which is still the same length of time, 10 years, as it was, you know, when the program was created in the 1950s. So we're at a situation now where students are borrowing a very significant amount of money. Our median and average, they hover right on top of each other at about 162 last year, which oddly was down about $3,000 from the year before, which is good news. But what is distinguishing about student loans in the broader sense of federal student loans is that it's the most flexible loan you'll probably ever get. And it seems like they're expensive, and when we're comparing them to other loans, for example, a mortgage right now, it's 4.25% for a mortgage that's gone up, but at 7% for a graduate plus, that seems expensive, but some of the financial folks in this room can remember the 80s where mortgages were 15 to 18% and you were happy to have one. So our perspectives of them are different from all sorts of other things because we've been in the low interest rate environment for such a long time. But the most important thing about student loans, and if we just have one thing to remember today about student loans, is that because of the different repayment plans and the different forgiveness options that may exist, you aren't being told what to do by your loans. You can tell your loan what you plan to do. And that's really true. And that if we have the ability just to sit with a student one-on-one, it's not how much have you borrowed, it's what do you want to do, because we can make the loans do what they need to do as long as you haven't made a forever decision like consolidating your federal loans to a private loan, and then you've lost all your options. So there are times and places where you need to talk to somebody, but the key is they are incredibly complicated. And when you talk to somebody, you want to make sure they understand the pros and the cons of a student loan. You know, by default, you want to pay loans quickly, but sometimes the right answer, especially for our grads, is to pay it slowly, because if we're looking at most of our grads, you're probably broke to start. And the first thing you want to do is get financial security and savings. So you pay the insurance of the higher interest rate while you are able to get some savings. So the key word in there, all of that, rather lengthy description, is flexibility. And you have flexibility to determine what you want to do with your life. You just need to figure out what that is, and we can help you get on the right path forward.
Thank you, Dean. I appreciate that. That was one of the things I remember us talking about, and I was immediately shocked. I was thinking, no, I want to pay it all yesterday. You know, that's my personality, and that makes the most sense to me. So that, again, was sort of illuminating the reason why it's good to have someone to talk to sort of think bigger, how to you know, be creative or even strategic about how to pay off something as different and unique as a student loan. This next question I would like to direct to Matthew. try not to talk to the back of your head. Can you talk about your transition from law school? What are some of the things to come post-school? So what can a current student financially prepare for? I know that some may be thinking about starting a family or buying a home, maybe even starting a business. And maybe while you talk about this, you and I, when we met, we addressed the possible struggle of someone transitioning eventually from the private sector to the public sector, which is a transition that other law students have considered if they go right into the public sector and then, private, and then they want to transition later. These are big financial decisions. Could you sort of illuminate sort of post-apocalyptic world for us?
Yes. Yes. For most law students, you're going to graduate in May or June, and 90 days after graduation, I believe, is when your first student loan payment is due. About 60 days after graduation is when most people take the bar exam. And for many people, you won't start your job if you go to a large law firm or if you go to a judge for about 120, 150 days. And so you can have a lengthy period there without any income coming in. And then there are ways, I think, with how you time your last semester's student loan draw amount. And there are some employers who offer medium-term loans to get you to that first paycheck. But that's something to start planning about before you even graduate of, I'm going to be studying for the bar. I'm probably not going to be working while I'm doing that. I'm going to have a bar exam fee. I think for New York it was $600 or $700. You're going to have travel to a bar exam site probably. You might be moving to a new job and have moving expenses. And if you're starting a new business, there's going to be a lot of expenses associated with that. I recently started, I acquired a rental property, and just getting the paperwork in order with the District of Columbia to be a landlord was north of $1,000. And so if you're going to be forming an LLC to have a part like a law practice, you're going to have registration fees for that. You're going to have different kinds of certifications if you're going into the financial industry. And so planning ahead while you're still in law school of what are my expenses going to be before that first paycheck comes in the door? Or if you're a small business owner, will there be a paycheck that comes in the door? Am I thinking more 6 months or 9 months before I can expect a steady stream of income to be coming in? And so those are the kinds of things that I would be considering at this point as you get closer to graduation. The other point Janice touched on was most of us will change many careers. I was talking here with Edwin before we got up on stage, and just seeing the number of different companies he's worked for in completely different sectors of the economy, and thinking back to my own prior career as an accountant, that even if you stay in law, you could very well change that. You might go to a clerkship for a year, and there you're talking about 60, maybe 70,000, and that's a reasonable pay level. And then you might go to a big firm for a couple of years, and most people don't stay at a big firm. I know at my firm, I think they say 75% of incoming associates will leave for another employer. At some firms in New York, it's upwards of 95% that leave for another employer before making partner. And so you have to expect that if you have this great income level at a large law firm, that might only be for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And during those years, you want to be saving, you want to be minimizing your debt, you want to be constraining your lifestyle so that when you leave a firm and say go in-house, you might go work for the government, you might go in the nonprofit sector, that you'll want to make a smoother transition to the different pay level. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that you can always learn how to spend more money, but it's harder to learn to spend less money.
Yeah. Please.
Agree with everything. You do have 6 months after graduation to make your loan payment. So all good news added to his. So.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I have been sort of thinking about some of these things myself. Just generally, what is the cost of graduating? Not just physical, but the financial cost of that. The next question I would like to direct to Mr. Wilson Muscadin. I opened up by discussing how important this was for me to launch this event during Black History Month. When you and I talked about this event and I invited you to come and speak, you said some things that really stuck with me, and they were numbers. I don't expect you to remember everything that we talked about, but I thought it was really jarring. And one of those numbers was 2, and it was, we're only in our 2nd generation. Yeah. So I won't fill in the blanks, but can you illuminate the relevance and importance of a financial health symposium during Black History Month? And what does it say about all the other students who are here, Black and non-Black alike? Can you discuss the importance of building a foundation, you know, sort of in the context of our history?
Yeah, and first I'll start out in the macro sense that it's my personal belief that economic independence or financial stability is one of the key factors in terms of freedom. If you think about freedom in this country, your ability, where you go, your health outcomes, your level of education, all sorts of things are defined differently for people that are wealthy than versus people that are not. And so when you think about your financial foundation, to me, that's one of the most important things that you can set up in your own life in order to have some sort of agency in terms of how you manage your time, your value, and your talent. And so in the context and sort of in terms of Black History Month, the reason I said 2 generations is oftentimes we talk about the racial wealth gap. And I think I have it written down here. The median Black family has just $1,700 in wealth. And so when we talk about wealth, that net worth number, we're talking about assets, what you own, minus liabilities, what you owe. And that number is your net worth. So we're talking $1,700. 30 years ago, that was nearly $7,000. So Black wealth has actually declined over the past 30 years. And there are all kinds of mitigating factors in that. I'm not going to get into all that. But when you think about that level of wealth, transferring that level of wealth to the next generation, you have classmates, for example, that have completely different experiences. So let's say, for instance, you have classmates that are not accumulating $120,000 of loans. So you go to the same law firm, and you're 6 figures behind the person that's sitting next to you, right? And so you're not starting on the same level, the same path. So building that financial foundation is so key in terms of being able to set yourself on a trajectory to go on a different level. And the reason I said 2 generations is, if you think the Civil Rights Act in 1964, if you're comparing, the reason I don't like the racial wealth gap numbers is comparing Black wealth to wealth of other groups is a little disingenuous. Because if you only have 2 generations to compare to versus 10, like you're not starting the race at the same point. And so it is imperative as a community that we start talking about money, the taboo topic, that we start talking about money, and we start talking about in terms of building wealth, because it's not necessarily that we need to catch up or we need this number. It's that wealth in this country is the agency, the currency by which you can truly be free. And so that's why we need to be having that discussion.
Sure, thank you. The last question that I have, and then I will open it up to the audience, is I would like to ask Ms. Nadia, can you discuss, so credit is important. It's just going to be the unspoken, very spoken thing that we all have to manage and protect from now until we die, especially if we have ideas of what we want to purchase or how we want to see our life. We probably are going to be looking to apply for a loan at some point, or we just want to have good credit. Can you discuss how to protect and improve your credit both personally and as a business entity? How can, and then I'll go ahead and ask the second question, and you can answer both. And this is, I think, appropriately followed by Mr. Wilson's points. How can you make sure that you are being treated fairly by your financial service providers?
So you said protect and build your credit.
Sure, yes.
To protect and build your credit, one thing that you have to make sure that you do is make sure that you review your credit, you check your credit regularly. Every year you are entitled to receive a free credit report from each bureau. My suggestion would be to review your credit reports as staggered. So you take one report so you can see all the accounts that you have on it. Maybe a few months later you review the other reports. That way you're keeping track of what's on there. You know for sure that that's accurate. For building, that would take time because every person has a specific situation that they have for their credit. So what we always want to advise is on-time payments. That is one of the major factors, making on-time payments over time, and making sure if you are in arrears, you reach out to your creditors so you can make a plan to pay back. That way they gain confidence and from over time and they see that you are actually making those payments. Now, for making sure that you're being treated fairly by your creditors, that is a question that you would do some research. You can see, all lenders, they are required to provide the information about the people that they're lending to and the rates that they're providing. So that is what I would suggest on that score. Now, I wouldn't personally know for all other entities, but for us, we do have it available for Wells Fargo. We can provide it in the branches and also on our website as well.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Thank you. So, thank you, timekeeper. Before I transition to the second panel, who will also give us some of their ideas on similar issues, is there a question maybe for the audience? And again, I just want to remind the audience that this is the building your foundation. This is, starting point, some of the building blocks and looking ahead. Does anybody perhaps have a question for the panel?
Janice, just from the back.
Yes, okay.
I have a question. Generally speaking, what is your best tip that you would give to someone whose finances are in arrears? The first step towards self-reliance.
The first step I would take would be to actually gather all the data for what you owe and make sure you calculate your debt-to-income ratio. And after doing that, I would definitely reach out to the lenders, especially if the accounts are in arrears, to make a payment plan with them so that you can make sure that you show a history that you're paying it back on time.
I would take a step back, and the reason I do this is when I coach people on personal finance, oftentimes there's a lot of shame, blame, and guilt that goes on with money. One of the reasons that people aren't raising their hands to ask questions, right? So I think if you're in a tough financial situation and you know that you're in a tough financial situation, I think the first thing emotionally is to recognize that is a situation. It is not a personal problem, right? For example, if when people are approaching like a bankruptcy situation, their finances are in arrears and they're in a bad financial situation, emotionally they would say, I am bankrupt, as opposed to I have a bad financial situation. Do you hear the difference between I am bankrupt and I have massive debt? And so, because what I find with people is that emotionally they are stuck in an emotional situation that has them paralyzed, and it blocks them from being able to move forward and do stuff. So just, I would say, emotionally recognize that is the situation, and that is not a personal affront to you or whoever you're referring to. Sorry.
Can we, oh, okay.
Have you ever suggested to perhaps some of your colleagues to move back in with their parents until they get their financial situation together? Is that an option?
I know I've made that suggestion to people. Where is she? No,
To answer that question, I often reframe it as, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Where is your goal? I mean, in terms of financial planning, I think the unspoken first step is actually to figure out where the heck you want to go. Because if you don't know where you want to go, how can you create a plan to get there? So if you envision yourself buying a house in 2 years, and I have a set of alums that we're working with that they are planning on moving back into one of the in-laws' houses, and they're going to be there for 2 years, and the whole purpose is not because they can't do something. It's because they want to do something more. And when you determine where your values are and what your goals are, then you can start telling your dollars what to do. And until you do that, you're lost. And so one of the things, just so we can answer, there was a question that was raised about credit. I think I just want to put a period on that, in that when it comes to student loans, you're looking at significant values of them well in excess of some mortgages. However, student loans don't affect your credit score in a negative. Why? Because as far as credit scoring works, it's just a model of correlations. You know, if you have a credit score of about 640, I can't tell you you're going to default, but if you put 100 people with a 640 in the room, I can tell you that probably 8 of them will. Can't tell you which ones. And the correlations with student loans, especially high-value student loans, is very positive. So your credit score, all things being equal, once you go into repayment, will move up promptly. So just know that the student loans aren't impacting your credit score, nor are they impacting your future, unless you let them impact your future by not paying them on time.
Thank you. I want us to go ahead and transition to our second panel, but please know that there's a reception afterwards. We'll also be doing a lot of drawing a lot of raffle prizes, so you want to be a part of that, and everybody will be available for more private questions. So let's say thank you. So the next half of the panel focuses on launching from dreams to reality. Hey, best friend. And I think that this is where some of us, most of us, hope to be. We have what we want, or we're articulating, in the process of articulating what we want in our heads, but we want to launch from that place into reality. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Edwin Gaskin. Ed's clientele includes families, clergy, business owners, highly compensated professionals, and just about every honorable profession. Yes. Just this last point, the common thread is that they are thinking, caring, and achievement-oriented people that recognize they can accomplish more on purpose than by accident. I really appreciated that. His colleague, whom we are so grateful to have with us, Ms. Jeanette Jordan, who is an investment advisor and financial planner, also with MassMutual. I forgot to mention that, Mr. Edwin. Jeanette Jordan maintains an expertise in insurance and investment strategies, as well as advising business owners. Thank you. She offers full financial needs analysis through a network of experienced professionals with expertise in advisory services, retirement analysis and programs, estate strategies, employee benefits, and retention services. With her combination of experience and professionalism, she has access to a wide variety of products and services, making her super successful at helping her clients achieve their financial goals. Next, I would like to introduce Mr. Isaiah Williams. a financial advisor and not a stranger to the Georgetown law community. Isaiah is a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Finner & Smith, Incorporated in the Washington, D.C. branch office. Isaiah is registered to recommend a wide variety of financial solutions to help clients pursue their goals and assist in tracking progress along the way. Thank you. Last but certainly not least, I would like to welcome Mr. Kevin Matthews, who has an extraordinary biography. Kevin Matthews II is a licensed financial advisor, author, and speaker. After obtaining the FINRA Series 7 and Series 66 licenses in 2014, Kevin became a financial advisor in New York, where he has helped hundreds of individuals plan for their retirement, in addition to managing more than $140 million in his career. And Kevin, only if you feel comfortable, actually, maybe I shouldn't ask, but you're very young, yes? 28. Yeah. Lots of things that have already happened in your young life, which we're very excited for. Let's just give our panelists a round of applause for being here. So I would like to start this panel off the same way I started the last, and asking why financial health? Where was the turning point for you when you realized this is really important to me, and it's so important that I want to be able to give this information to the next person, because I recognize the value that this has in others' lives? We can start with Mr. Gaskin.
Wow, I'm going to try to keep this brief, and thank you for not saying the oldest person. You said the youngest, you didn't say the oldest. Appreciate that.
Well, you don't look it, so I didn't know that.
Anyway, I'm thrilled to be here because you guys are the chosen people. You all chose to be here tonight where you didn't have to be. And so that's a great starting point, no question about it. My calling to be in this industry started with growing up as the child of two teachers. And in the time that I grew up, teachers really stood in the gap. And I'm sure there are many of you at the school who still do that, and there may be some instructors, teachers, and professors here in the room. I know at least one. And at that time, literally, my parents would bring people home every once in a while. People that would stay for a week, sometimes a weekend, sometimes a month, sometimes for months. And then beyond the school community, the wider community, people transitioning to the United States might come, and they'd stay at our house. So I had a very fascinating childhood growing up as an only child. I had all these other people in my house, even though I was an only child. Now, why am I mentioning all this? I'm mentioning all this is because as I was growing up, I thought it was normal to intervene in people's lives and to make a difference, and to literally change the course of people's lives, because that's what my parents did all the time. But as you can well imagine, the last thing I wanted to be was a teacher, right? So I went off to college. I thought, and Matt's not here, but I thought I wanted to become a lawyer, believe it or not. So I went off to the university that I thought would best prepare me to do that. And then my first summer after freshman year, I got to be a congressional intern. And when I saw how laws were made, I went 180 degrees in the other direction. Something about seeing sausage made just doesn't have the same effect. So I went into my career on the, really as a consultant. I started my career as a consultant and thought I would make a difference by helping companies and organizations be much more effective and more efficient. But anyone who hasn't had that experience, if you're going to go into the law area and you're going to go into firm, you'll get a sense of what I experienced. You go in there, you write a lot of stuff, and guess what? Your name isn't anywhere on it. and I realized that the impact I was having was only temporary. And so after about making a transition into the IT industry and doing business development for about literally 20 years, my dad got ill. And he was terminally ill, and as a result, it made me reflect about what I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing. And so literally, I wish I could tell you the whole story, but through a sequence of events, I was led through eventually a call through something called Monster Board, which I don't even know they have anymore. It was the predecessor to all these online services, where I got a call saying, you know what, people with your background do really great as financial planners. Why don't you come and talk to us? Well, I had a financial planner, so I wasn't thinking about being one. But I had done an assessment about the things I wanted to do in my life. Again, the whole idea of setting goals, setting targets. And as a result of that, I knew what was important to me. I knew what I was good at. I knew what I wasn't good at. And I set this list up and said, I want to do something in that field. Well, when I went to meet with these people, I was blown away, because what I discovered was that everything that they offered me was on my list. The ability to make a difference, the ability to change the course of people's lives, the ability to make a difference not only in an individual setting, but also from a community standing. And being here tonight is just a wonderful way of reflecting that. Jeanette and I, and I'm sure these other gentlemen, love going into the community and talking. It wouldn't make any difference if there were 8 people here. Because if someone makes a different decision or changes direction because of us being here tonight, I think we will have achieved our goal.
You're right.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, putting together the pieces of being here and Black history, I was born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was the site of the 1920
Wow.
race riot.
Yeah.
I live literally 1 block from Greenwood Avenue. Wow. And what brought me into that, I was a teacher previously before coming into finance, but for me and the people in my city currently, we're still in the same spot. We still don't have a hospital on our side of town. We still don't have a grocery store on our side of town. The lifespan for African Americans in North Tulsa, where that event occurred, is 7 years less. 7 years less than people on the other side of town. Wow. And obviously, a lot of that is because of money. You don't have any money, you don't have access to health care, you don't have any agency over yourself and the people around you. And that's what led me into it, because I felt that financial freedom is our only hope, as Jason said. But that's what brought me into it, because I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to show people, whether you have $200,000 alone, whether your parents have money, whether you just started out with your first dime, that you can do something. And there's a starting point for everyone to make some motion forward.
Thank you.
Well, I think I have a much simpler sort of a simpler reason as to why I'm in the financial world, but a larger impact simply because my mom told me to do it. much like many decisions, my mom told me to do it.
It makes you a wise son.
But she said it in a way, not Isaiah, go out and become a financial advisor. She said it. She's been speaking to me pretty much my entire life, just with stories, her experiences, just growing up. As an African American woman from the inner city of Chicago. I come from a pretty big family. I have 6 brothers and sisters. I fall next to the youngest. And, I just always recall my mom working, countless hours, 12-hour days, 16-hour days. And after a while as a kid, you just grow accustomed to mom works all day, every day. She works hard, and, we reap the benefits of it. And as I got older, I started to recognize, hey, my classmates' parents are picking them up from school. Why don't you pick me up from school? Well, I'm traveling on the bus, or I'm still at work and doing overtime. And as I got older, I started to ask more and more questions. And I developed a gene to get into sports. So I've been playing football since I was 8 years old. And I can recall playing in maybe a couple hundred games by the time I got to high school, between flag football and tackle football. And I can recall my mom being at maybe 4, right? And I understood, again, it's just one of those things, hey, mom has to work. And again, I started to ask those questions, hey, mom, I think I'm pretty good, so I would love to, showcase my talent to you. And so, well, son, I have bills to pay and things like that. So again, just kind of fast forward into my adult life, I asked her again, hey, mom, you've been working for, 25 years at the time, long as I was, been born at the time. I said, mom, when do you plan to slow it down a little bit? And then from there, she proceeded to tell me a story how she comes from a very large family. She has 10 brothers and sisters, where she was near the youngest. I think she's 3rd from the youngest. But, indirectly, she became pretty much the next in line in terms of priority and being responsible to carry the workload of the family. My grandmother, her mother, passed away abruptly from a massive heart attack in 1990, and she absorbed not only her family's sort of debt and responsibility, she absorbed her mother's, along with all of her siblings. And because of the type of person she is, she handled it and just took it on the chin and did exactly what she could to go out and, sustain a life for her own family as well as continue her mom's legacy. So in order to do that, she had to work these hours and really, climb out of, different holes and provide for the family. And I look back and I see that situation and, a lot of that could have been avoided with having a plan in place, having an advisor, having insurance, talking about, different retirement solutions, talking about having wills and trust in place when you do pass on behalf of my grandmother. So, I look at my mom's situation and say, hey, if something could have been done, for your mother, I want to be able to do that same thing for my mom and avoid any sort of situations like that. So that, and on top of the fact that, as I alluded to before, I'm a former football player, so I had the opportunity to play at the University of Illinois. I was a starting quarterback from there, and I had the opportunity to play in the NFL for a season. And I would look at my teammates, and my personal career was very short-lived as a professional, but I played with, some pretty high-profile people, individuals, I can't say names, of course. And I just have a serious issue when you hear these, these dreadful stories about, how a guy can go and get drafted as a first-round draft pick on Thursday, receive a signing bonus on Monday for, let's call it $3 million. 2 weeks later, you're taking out personal loans. I'm not understanding. Maybe I'm delusional, but something's not adding up, right? And you used to start to hear the different stories, the intense spending, or they get a hold of some sharks in the industry that doesn't necessarily have their best interests at heart. And you hear these horrific stories about how, guys go from, having so much money in a short period of time to being, living check to check or filing bankruptcy in a couple of years. I just don't necessarily agree with it, and I did, I started to do some research on how I can positively affect change in that sort of demographic, because again, we're talking about guys, not only that I watch on television, but friends of mine and people that I have relationships with, and I wanted to be able to be in a position where I could be hands-on and help out. And I dove into this industry roughly about 2 years ago. I've been doing some individual investing for the last 4. Not necessarily knowing exactly what I was doing at that time, but it was a launch pad to get into this world, to start to understand it. Yeah. And a little bit over a year ago, I joined Merrill Lynch, and I've been doing a pretty good job of making some headway in terms of just getting out. Of course, you acquire some clients along the way, but the biggest impact for me is being able to spread some knowledge and spread some education on the importance of finance, because you're right, this is a topic that people sort of stray away from. They don't necessarily want to talk about it. They don't necessarily want to be transparent about it, because sometimes we just don't make the best decisions. Like, yes, we can sit here today and see the finished product, but we had some miscellaneous shopping sprees in college on credit cards that we probably should have done on some, different things, right? Yeah. So, but because of that, we don't have these transparent conversations. So I've been able to do that and been able to sit on panels like this and be very, very excited about the potential effects that we can have on young lives.
Yeah. Thank you, Isaiah.
Okay, my story is I was pre-law and English major because I planned to go to law school. And my mom said, why don't you, after graduating, why don't you work for a law firm to see if that's something that you wanted to do? So I started working for a bankruptcy law firm. The attorney made all the money, I did all the work. But I did get to counsel a lot of the clients that came into the bankruptcy law firm. Their spirits were broken. They just didn't know which way to turn other than this was their last resort. So I had already been in an investment club because I started investing very young, and I wanted to, when I made the decision after talking with my husband about going into the business, because it really is your own business. If you don't work, you don't get paid. So it's not you're not going to get a salary just by walking in the door. I did a lot of soul searching. We bought rental property so we can have income coming in, other streams of income, and just decided that this was a passion for me, because I saw when the light bulb went off with just my friends and my family that I was able to help. I knew that this was something that I would be really good at, and I really am. And I love working with my clients. My clients love working with me. That's always a good thing. But it's very rewarding, and I don't think I could see myself doing anything else. But, you know, I would always say just reach out to somebody and ask the questions, because always at the end of our meetings, and people will always say, I didn't know that. So you can't say that anymore, because now you know you have somebody that you can call on. So I would always just say to you, if you have any questions, always reach out to somebody, because you don't know everything. You may know the law, but you know the finances are something that you're not, you may not be fully aware of. So just make sure that you reach out and talk to somebody about your situation.
Thank you, thank you. I want to do this a little bit differently than I did the first half of the panel. We opened up for questions at the very end, but I think this would be a great time to give someone an opportunity, or the audience an opportunity, to ask questions. That way the panelists has maybe a little bit more time to address the exact ideas of the audience. Oh, okay, we've got two questions. So one first here, and then the second one up there.
What do you counsel students in terms of starting to save with student loan debt? Obviously, there's, you know, costs are compounding. You don't start to save early enough, but you have these people that, well, I just really want to wipe out my student loan debt. How do you counsel where that's concerned?
Yeah, that is a common question I get when I teach classes, and it's probably number one and number two questions, like, should I start investing or save, or should I pay off student loan debt? The real answer is yes, it depends. However, my honest answer is you can be debt-free and broke. So that does happen. You can throw all your money the first 4 or 5 years, pay off your student loans, and then when you need something, when you're in an emergency, you have to take on debt because you didn't save to begin with. So you can do both at the same time. That's one thing you should do. But I am more for taking care of yourself and your family, so starting to invest, starting to save, and then paying the loan off at the same time. But you have to take care of yourself at the end of the day, because that first emergency, when it hits, and it will, and it's not going to tell you when it's going to happen, you have to pull that money from somewhere, and preferably it's from your savings account and not your retirement account.
Or credit cards.
Right, exactly.
Thank you. Oh, excuse me. Yes.
Hi, similar question, but different investment options out here. What would you consider starting out for investment options?
Go ahead. No, because you did. Go ahead.
So it varies, and I think a few people alluded to it earlier. I try to use an analogy when I talk about the process of getting started. So now you use the app, phones, the apps on our phones. So if you think about the map, right, you look at Google Maps, as soon as you open that map, the first thing that happens, a pin drops, and it says, where are you now? In order to get to where you want to go and create a pathway, you have to figure out where you are currently in that space. So we have to sort of break down as to, you know, what are you trying to do? Are you looking to, you know, save for retirement? Are you looking to buy, you know, a home in the next few years? Are you looking to save for, you know, children's college tuition? So those are some of the, you know, the early or immediate sort of parameters that you want to start out with. And then from there, you start to cast out different investment vehicles you get into. And then from there, it's contingent upon, you know, how aggressive you want to be in terms of, you know, do you want to be, you know, 100% to equities? Do you want to have a more diverse portfolio where you have some fixed income? Do you want to, you know, really try to make a play in the equity space where you overexpose yourself, hoping to make, you know, larger gains in a shorter period of time? So it's really contingent upon, and it's a case-by-case thing when you're talking to different clients, you know, where you want to go, and sort of using that as a launching pad to get started.
I want to say one thing. So if you are working for an employer that has a 401k, I would suggest you start investing there, and especially if there's a match. Don't leave money on the table. At least put in the amount that you need to put in so that you can get the match, because otherwise you're just leaving free money on the table. So that's one of the things I would suggest to people when they start working. Just make sure you start with that retirement plan. Even if you can't put the amount in for the match, at least start the systematic savings, because the compounding and the time frame is, because you have such a long time, you will have the compounding on your side.
And there's very few places you can get 100% on your money legally.
Right, and that's with the match.
Yeah. Yes.
So, what kind of advice do you have for people who are, know they need sort of financial advisor help, but don't know even like the type of help to seek out? You know, so
Yeah. I would like to add on to the question. I apologize because I was really inspired by putting, this program together and realizing I don't really know anything. I mean, how many times did I have to go look up the letters behind your name? Like, but I want to just add to that when you answer it is there a transaction cost to figuring that out? Because, I mean, how much does it cost someone, either in time or in money, to sit with someone to talk, and then you realize, oh my God, I just paid you $500, but actually I don't really need this help at all?
Go ahead.
I'm totally partial when I'm giving you my answer, so keep that in mind, okay? Our practice is built around fee-based financial planning. And the benefit of that is it always starts with why. We can think of all the financial tools that are available in the marketplace and all the strategies available, even from the standpoint of protection versus growth and investing. But if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, and this is what I appreciate about what Dean started with, if you don't know where you're trying to go, how can you possibly build a route to get there? And the benefit of starting out with financial planning is that you don't have to know where you're going before you start. When you start with a product, you kind of have to have an idea, well, if I go to an investment guy, I'm going to make my money grow. If I'm going to an insurance guy, I'm going to buy protection. Well, guess what? You might not need any of those, or you might need all of those. So to get an objective opinion, and again, I'm partial, I admitted that, that's where I would begin. If you already know you have financial goals, but you have life goals that take money, which is really, really what that's all about, that's where I would begin.
And I would add, when you speak to a financial planner, the things that you mentioned, starting a family, wife works, I graduate on this day, this is how much I have in loans. If you can bring that to your financial planner, that makes things a lot easier, so you can see the full picture. The worst thing, or one of the worst things, is you're an advisor trying to help someone out, but they're withholding information. And if I can't help you as the whole person if I don't know that this issue is here, or that this issue is here that you're not mentioning, because that's not going to help me help you give you the full plan.
That's right. I think this is a really great time to I'm sure you guys looked through your programs, but it was through this process and understanding that the first question we must ask ourselves is, where do we want to go, and what is the ultimate goal? And so in putting the program together, I made sure that there was opportunity for everybody to do that. There is an entire page just dedicated to what do you want to do, and then we had someone contribute wonderfully a budget tool so that you have a place to start for those of you that are interested. I would like to open it up for just one more question, and if not from the audience, then I have one. But right before we break for reception and have some prizes. Yes, in the back.
Yes, I would like to bring up what I think might be considered a titillating topic.
Okay.
Here we go. Today I read an interesting article about a person of significant wealth marrying a woman who was 30-some years younger than him. I didn't say it. Someone else saw it. So I don't know anything about the two of them and their relationship, so I'm not obviously not commenting on that. But as far as a business is concerned, I would assume that at least one of you would love to have the opportunity to consult them, find out. Not to assume that there would be any problem with that, but there have been situations where people marry outside of their income realm, and it does raise red flags. And so I would wonder if any one of you have any perspective on that.
Sounds like a hidden tax question.
I don't have any.
I'll tell you something that's a lot more common, and that's when two people come together, especially after working, maybe going to professional school, get married, and they have two separate financial structures, and they're trying to figure out how to make what they have individually work together. That's a much more common challenge that we often face. And so, yes, we love helping people figure out how they can do that, because it all goes back, if it sounds like a broken record, it all goes back to the goals. We allow the goals to unify them, and that's a way to get them starting to work together.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So Bob and I are actually fellow University of Illinois alum, and I had the privilege of meeting Bob and sustaining a relationship with Bob over the years. So Bob actually has his own sort of, investment sort of shop that he sort of, produced himself, and he has a great team that works for him there. So, but in situations like that, I think it all falls back to where you want to go with this. Like, what is the goal? Like, what is to come of this? Is this a situation where, you want to, join forces with the individual and, bring on to what I've developed and created over these years, or are there different wills or different, trust attached? Are there, different sort of, power of attorney, things like that. So, but it all alludes back to, where you're trying to go, because without that, we're kind of in a tough spot in terms of providing any sort of solution.
But I just want to ask, do you find it prenuptials are more common because of the way things are now?
Yeah, absolutely. And you see it, in situations like that when you have, two different sort of, financial backgrounds. I often laugh because a lot of my former teammates and friends that I know professionally, they bring that conversation up like that. So it's just like, yeah, I love you to death, and I want to share the world with you, but I need you to sign this sheet of paper saying that if anything happens, you walk away with what you came in with, right? But it's a very transparent thing when you start to talk about different sort of tiers of wealth. It's a conversation that needs to be had, and a lot of times people are on different pages, and that creates friction. But again, it just all boils back to just being very straightforward and say, hey, this is what we want to do, and this is where we want to go.
I will let that be the last question. Let's give our panelists a round of applause.
Thank you.
And if I can entice you, food is already enticing enough, but there are just so many amazing contributions that our panelists and partners have put in for this evening. So there's Uber gift cards, there's all kinds of yummy stuff, food gift cards, and we want to raffle it off, okay? It's going to burn a hole in my pocket. So I will see you in sports and fitness. There will be, I think, some a movement of people moving in that direction, so I hope to see you there. Thank you.